This is a sports catastrophe production. Hey there, hello, ho there. Jeff Cutter welcoming you to another sports catastrophe on this day. And on this day, October 19th, 40 years ago, you can probably guess the anger in my voice. Well, as a Canadian baseball fan, I can't overlook this. Fucking Rick Monday. Like, ugh, I could give you a diatribe of 10 different curse words, but I gotta keep it as clean as possible. So anyway, Rick Monday. You know Blue Monday in baseball circles, 1981. So anyway, I know I could have talked to the great Danny Gallagher about his thoughts about the 1981 NLCS, and I forgot to figure I could try to get him on the show because he is a Facebook friend of mine, but whatever. So anyway, the 1981 baseball season as a whole was a mess. So of course, I've got to give context to everything first. I should. So, the 1981 season, there was a threat of a player strike, and there was a strike on June 9th. The players struck. The owners struck with them, too. So, there was a lot of issues with free agents, compensation for free agency. So, over the course of 50 days, baseball was at a standstill. Nothing happened. And the worst part is there was nothing to fill TV screens. So, basketball and hockey didn't put their title games in June until way back in the 1980s. Till later on. Football was obviously there was no spring football team. The CFL could do so well, but I mean, they didn't start off that fast. So what are you gonna do? Like, this was the wrong time to have a baseball strike, in a sense. Well, nothing much. But the owners did, after 50 days, say, fine, we'll talk about the free agent compensation and all that. So they negotiated with the players. The strike was over. They were going to have an all-star game in August of 1981 at Cleveland Stadium. And it was packed at Cleveland Stadium. However, there was one tiny little problem. So many games were lost. They didn't know what to do. So they decided to go with a split season format. And the rules were that every team that led the AL East, West, NL East and West would be first half champions, would go to what they call the divisional series, a different format than the LDSs that we know since 1995. And then second half winners, like games played in the second half, those winners would face each other. Now, of course, there was the complication that what if one team won both halves? MLB, instead of saying, oh, well, you guys go to the LCS automatically, basically said, then the second place person from the team from the second half gets in. Now, there were no controversies about that, as every first half and second half winner of divisions were different teams. But there was one tiny little problem. You had to win either half. There were probably teams that would be so great that they failed miserably and didn't get in to the LCS or the LDS for that matter. Enter the 1981 Reds and the 1981 Cardinals. Both of them really the best teams in their division with the two halves. But guess what? They did not win either of their halves. So there was a lot of problems and all that. So anyhow, the LA Dodgers had to take on the Houston Astros in their LDS. Houston was a tough opponent. They actually won the first two games on home turf. But the Dodgers had a trick up their sleeve. The next three games were at Dodger Stadium. And lo and behold, they won all three of them. So the Dodgers went to the LCS. The Expos were the second half champions of the NL East, narrowly taking care of St. Louis. So it's Philly versus Montreal. Montreal had the advantage of playing the first two games on home turf, which they won. And then they lost games 3 and 4, especially game 4 to a George Vukovich home run. But Steve Rogers shockingly got past Steve Carlton for the second time in that series, and the Expos won 3-0 to get to the LCS. And it was a shocking moment. So, on to the LCS. Montreal versus Los Angeles. We're not really talking about the 1981 World Series in a sense, but New York seemed to be good. They took care of Oakland in their ALCS to get to the World Series. So anyway, the Dodgers would send Bert Hooton to the mound against Bill Gullickson. Gullickson, who had 18 strikeouts as a rookie in 1980 in a game. Dodgers easily beat Montreal 5-1. Based on back-to-back home runs by Pedro Guerrero and Mike Scioscia. Montreal the next day would shock LA 3-0. It's Fernando Valenzuela, though, the hot shit rookie, if you will, looked good facing Ray Burris. But Ray Burris shocked everyone by pitching a complete game shutout. The Dodgers could only get 5 hits off Burris, all singles. Montreal did get a pair of runs in the second thanks to Warren Cromartie and Tim Raines. And then they got a third run to win 3-0. Then is a Friday, October 16th, Game 3 in Montreal, the first LCS game played in Canada. Remember, the Blue Jays didn't get to the LCS until 1985. Steve Rogers on the mound against Jerry Royce. Steve Rogers did good. I mean, Ron Sagan an RBI ground out. But the 6th inning was huge. Montreal would score 4 runs in that inning. Larry Parrish hit a single to score a run, and then Jerry White, not really known for his home run power, he crushed one over the left field fence to win the game 4-1. Montreal was 1 win away from the World Series. The Yankees were sitting quietly because they swept the Oakland A's. So it was either going to be the Dodgers-Yankees World Series that Baseball Purists won it, or 2 cosmopolitan superstars. So Montreal had a chance on that Saturday to win. It was 1-1 through 7 innings. Bert Hooton versus Bill Gullickson. Unfortunately, the 8th inning made things unraveled. Steve Garvey hit a 2-run home run to make it 3-1. Gullickson got chased. And then Dusty Baker hit a 2-run single. LA won 7-1. So now it was Game 5 on a beautiful Sunday, on a Sunday afternoon that a lot of Canadian fans would probably watch baseball more than football. Uh-oh. What? There was a snow/cold out on October 18th, which meant the game was postponed to Monday. The worst part is they had to play on Monday because the World Series would start the next day on October 20th. Kind of pathetic, don't you think? Olympic Stadium was only 2/3 full for this cold and drizzly Monday afternoon game, which was very dramatic, to say the least. Fernando Valenzuela versus Ray Burris, a repeat of Game 2. Montreal scored in the first inning off of a Tim Raines double, and then he scored on a double play. Thankfully, Montreal didn't have any outs, so no RBI was given. So it was 1-0. Dodgers tied it after a Rick Monday single, remember the name, and then Pedro Guerrero went to third base on a Pedro Guerrero single. And then Fernando grounded out, scoring the run. So it's 1-1. It was a tight game for these guys and all that. And then Montreal needed to use Steve Rogers, mostly because Jeff Reardon had a shoulder injury and didn't really pitch in that series. So they had to think of something. Although they could have got Elias Sosa, Woody Fryman, even Bill Lee should have had a chance. But no, they decided to go with Rogers, trying to get rid of LA. The good news for Steve Rogers was that he retired the first 2 batters, including a fly ball that, who was the guy? I have to do my research here. I forgot to basically give you the starting lineups. I should have given you the starting lineup. So, of Dodgers Expos. I mean, like, this is one of the biggest matchups of all time. I mean, Game 5 is huge. So, Dodgers and Expos played in the afternoon. Dodgers starters were Davey Lopes at second, Bill Russell at short, Dusty Baker in left field, Steve Garvey at first, Ron Say at third, Rick Monday at right, Pedro Guerrero in center, Mike Scioscia at catcher, and Fernando Valenzuela at pitcher. Montreal had Tim Raines in left, Ronnie Scott at second, Andre Dawson at center, Gary Carter catching, Larry Parrish at third, Jerry White right field, Warren Cromartie at first, Chris Beyer at short, and Ray Burris pitching. So yeah, so it was kind of there. And then Tim Wallach pinch hit for Burris and grounded out. So Steve Rogers came in, got Garvey on a pop fly, and Ron Say almost hit the winning home run to left field, but the wind made it die down. Remember, Olympic Stadium was open air until 1988. So, and then came Rick Monday. Rogers had a 3-1 count on him, and then Monday hit a pitch to right field that somehow floated over Andre Dawson in right field and floated over the fence. And the fans were upset. Rick Monday, the guy who saved an American flag from protesters in 1976 while playing for the Cubs at Dodger Stadium, ironic enough, had just hit one of the best pitches of all time. Pedro Guerrero struck out. No big deal. And then the Expos had to deal with some things. Rick Monday was replaced by Ken Landreau. So Ronnie Scott came in and grounded out. Andre Dawson flew out, and it was all up to Gary Carter. He got a walk, and then they needed a pinch runner, so they pinch ran with Jerry Manuel. Larry Parrish walked. Fernando was taken out of the game for Bob Welch, who was a pretty good closer at that time. Jerry White, on the first pitch, grounded out. Game over. And the Dodgers had won the World Series, or won a trip to the World Series, and the Expos just can't believe it. It didn't help that the Expos only got 3 hits off Dodger pitching that day. But man, it was deflating, to say the least. This was the last postseason game in Montreal, and it took 31 years for Montreal/Washington to get back into the playoffs. It was Blue Monday. It was one of the lowest points in team history and all that. So anyway, it was just terrible. The Dodgers did went on to win the World Series. They actually came back from an 0-2 deficit against the Yankees to win the World Series. So this was amazing. And of course, this was the only time the Expos got to the playoffs in 1981. And that was by fluke with the split season. They had close calls in 73. They were actually in the race for the NL East, even though they weren't really that good. 79, they lost in the final week to Pittsburgh. 1980, they had a 3-game winner-take-all series against the Phillies. Whoever won 2 out of those 3 games got to go to the World Series. But unfortunately, the Expos did not get there, as Philly won the first 2 games of that series. The Expos kind of fell off a cliff in the 80s and all that. In the 1990s, they weren't really that good. However, 92 and 93, they started to bounce back in a sense. A lot of people said that the Expos could have been NL East champions, but they ran out of time against Pittsburgh and Philadelphia, respectively, which I agree with. 94 was supposed to be the year that the Expos got themselves to the playoffs at the very least, but failed miserably because of the strike that canceled the postseason and cost Montreal roughly 15 million Canadian, or I think it was American, because someone said that if Montreal went to the postseason, there was broadcasting rights in Canada and the United States, so that would have given Montreal $15 million, possibly. I think the Expos probably would have won the 94 World Series. And then, Montreal just, nobody wanted to play for them because of the Canadian dollar and all that nonsense. Montreal tried to get a new stadium, but failed because of Montreal having to close hospitals. I understand that, and I think that is perfect, but they could have fixed something up. Bud Selig tried to fix things, but at the end, he let Jeffrey Loria freaking own the Expos, and then he allows Loria to sell the Expos to Major League Baseball. He buys the Florida Marlins, and then the guy who had the Marlins, John Henry, buys the Bo Sox, which is good news for Loria and Henry because their teams won the World Series in subsequent years. Loria in 2003 and John Henry's team, the Red Sox, in 2004. But the Expos were left with nothing. Zilch, nada. In fact, it was so bad that Loria took lots of equipment and people to Florida with him. And that with Major League Baseball almost contracting Montreal, but Montreal fans can thank Minnesota for complaining about themselves being contracted and then making the lawsuit. Anyhow, the Expos just fell off a cliff. 2003, they had a good chance to make the playoffs, but they weren't allowed to bring anyone up from the minors, and that could have helped them in the long run. But Florida won the wild card and the World Series. It was just a gut punch. And I still think Bud Selig's a piece of shit. Sorry, but that's the way I think. So anyway, I know the great Danny Gallagher, and I got a couple of books from him. A couple of his books. But anyway, yeah. He wrote the book Blue Monday, the Expos, Dodgers, and the home run that changed everything. He argued Rick Monday's home run was a moment that basically preceded the Expos' exit to Montreal. Had they won Game 5 and went to the World Series, Gallagher argues the Expos would still be in Montreal. That's not completely true. I disagree with that because, it can hold off for like 10, 20 years. I mean, like, if the Expos organization was terrible in the 90s and 2000s, I think Montreal probably still would have lost the franchise. Anyway, Montreal, that was a blown chance. Would the Expos have taken down the Yankees? Probably not. I say it would have been a 6 or 7 game series. That could have gone either way, even if the Yankees. But anyway, yeah, I don't hold a grudge. I mean, Rick Monday was harassed. He couldn't really go to Montreal because fans would really remember him and all that. He was a broadcaster for the Dodgers and couldn't go to Montreal as well because people would try to poison him. I mean, Montrealers are known as passionate fans, but mostly for hockey, more so than baseball. So yeah, the Dodgers just took care of the Expos quite easily, as it seemed. Montreal should have done themselves more favors by basically hitting better, but whatever. So yeah, so that was just the end of the road for Montreal baseball, as people say. I don't believe it. It was just pure coincidence. The Jeffrey Loria era killed Montreal. That's for sure. So, yeah, I could go into a lot more advanced, detailed analytics about the 1981 Expos, but, I don't want to bore you guys. And it's been 17 minutes. Yikes. But anyway, I better go before I make a thing going. I just hope Danny Gallagher likes it. Maybe he'll like it. Maybe he won't. But whatever. I still have his books. I'll still read them. I'll still read Expos books. I think I have more Expo books than Blue Jay books, which is unusual for me. But you know what? I'm a sucker for the Expos. What can I say? Anyway, I'm Jeff Diamond. I do